I think that it's so important for the country to see how the president takes time to respect people who are standing for our freedom every minute of every day. And I think we have to remember that.
All right, we're just going to stop here, Rebecca, just because we see President Trump. He just got in line right there at the end. You can see him in line with the other members of the military. Let's watch. Okay, obviously we're waiting for those transfer cases to be brought off of the plane right there. Everyone bowing their heads in a moment of silence. Of course, President Trump there, he will be the first to greet these fallen service members as soon as they come off that plane, and they will then be transferred into waiting vehicles that will then take them back to their families.
You know, back in 2009, actually, they changed their policy for this to allow media to cover the dignified transfer as long as the family approved for that. So you know that the family of these fallen National Guardsmen, the soldiers, they want the country to see, they want the world to see their loved ones come home and the ultimate sacrifice that they had made, and see how our country respects our fallen men and women when they come home. So important here that we do that in the United States, and you know, we remember them, their service, so we can all see.
And you can see Secretary of War Pete Hegseth right there. Of course, President Trump settling into that line again. Very solemn moment here. And just a reminder, the 2 guardsmen killed in the Syrian desert on Saturday were Sergeant Edgar Brian Torres Tovar, 25 years old, of Des Moines, Iowa, and Sergeant William Nathaniel Nate Howard, 29, of Marshalltown, Iowa. That is according to the U.S. Army. Again, saluting the fallen now, and let's just watch what happens for a moment. All right, again, that would be the first transfer has happened. And also a reminder, this is the first dignified transfer that President Trump has attended since he took office back in January. Again, something that is all too real for presidents, but again, the first for President Trump. Also, First Lady Melania Trump was scheduled to attend, but schedule change did not allow her to be there, just again, to give full transparency of the President and First Lady's attendance at this event. And again, you can see Secretary of War Pete Hegseth. We're going now in for the second transfer case to be retrieved and then taken to the transfer vehicle.
I think it speaks volumes to have the First Lady there as well. You know, the Trump family, the Secretary of War. Oh, excuse me.
Yeah, she was not able to.
Okay, I thought you just said she was there.
No.
Okay, all right. Reminds you of the threats, though, abroad. This was an ISIS-inspired attack in Syria. In the desert here, the 2 security forces, the U.S. and Syrians, meeting, and then a gunman showed up at the scene here, and the threats, it's always there.
All right, here comes the second transfer. We also want to point out that there will be a third transfer coming up that is of the U.S. civilian Ayad Mansour Sakat, who was working as an interpreter, who was also killed in this ISIS-like terrorist attack in Syria. And again, that will be the third transfer to happen. Now, once these transfer cases go to the transfer vehicle, as I said, they then go to the Armed Forces medical examiner, and then they continue to go through to their families, to their final resting place. So a long journey indeed, and this is the first time they come back home to the United States.
We know President Trump, he was invited by the families to attend. We know President Trump says this is one of the toughest things he has to do as president, is spend this time here at Dover Air Force Base and see our fallen soldiers come home.
All right, and we also know that President Trump did speak with the family members prior to this dignified transfer service again, so he has been in touch with them, consoling them, as we have heard by so many that he is so kind and so gracious when he does. And of course, there was a bit of a delay to the start of this, so we are guessing that it was because of that meeting with the families that had the start of this dignified transfer happen a bit late. We are now getting ready for the third of the civilian interpreter. Okay, again, we just saw the third transfer of the dignified transfer, and we just want to mention again those servicemen and the U.S. civilian who lost their lives in this Syrian ISIS-like attack on Saturday. Sergeant Edgar Brian Torres Tovar, 25, of Des Moines, Iowa. Sergeant William Nathaniel, called Nate Howard, 29, of Marshalltown, Iowa. They were both also members of the 1st Squadron and the 113th Cavalry Regiment. And finally, Ayad Mansour Sakat, the U.S. civilian who was working as an interpreter, also killed. We're going to bring in our guests for commentary here. Rebecca, I'm going to start with you here. This is never an easy thing. Again, you see these young men, these young people who have lost their lives defending us sitting right here.
Defending democracy, defending the United States and the values the United States puts forth. I think people have to recognize that it is a horrible thing for their families that these men and women go overseas to help us have a line of defense. And you're sitting in a bubble in America. Recognize that there are people who hate Americans and hate democracy and want to destroy it. And this president is trying to uphold the standards of democracy and the Constitution. And unfortunately, on days like today, we see the sacrifices that are made for freedom and democracy.
Well, Dan, you also see how fragile this is. We know President Trump, he'd been working in Syria, trying to do a lot of, PR with them to normalize relations. And then you have this ISIS-inspired attack, the gunman, showing up when the two security forces were meeting over there and then ambushed. Others were injured as well, 3 other soldiers. So it's a delicate balance, and they're always in harm's way, especially in regions like that.
They are, and every president, from Barack Obama, Ronald Reagan, said this is the hardest part of the job: writing thank you letters, calling these families. traditionally this was done at night. There are images from Trump's first term, Obama going there, there's still photographers. I actually think this is beautiful. If families are okay with it, the whole country gets to see and recognize and pay respects to these people. It's a moment for everyone to kind of stop, bow their head, and take a minute to think. And I actually think it's beautiful that the president is there, whoever the president is at the time, and that everybody recognizes their service.
Absolutely, and as Bob mentioned earlier, and to your point, Dan, it was in April of 2009 that the Secretary of Defense at the time announced a change in policy where the media could be there to cover this, to actually share this with Americans, and I think that is so important to do, and something that we should continue doing, not do it under the veil of night or with still photography, but actually honoring them and letting Americans and all of us honor them.
Yep.
Yeah, well, that's what this president, he's all about truth and transparency. And, I agree with you. I think it's so important for people to realize what's going on in the world. I think they're caught up right now. It's the holidays and the happiness, and that's all wonderful. But this was someone's brother, someone's son, and we need to remember that. And everybody in America needs to know that their kids basically are fighting for us.
Clearly, Rebecca, that's what their families wanted. They had to invite the media for us to have access, to have these live pictures here for this, to remember, their sons as they come home.
It's courageous, actually, for the families to do that. It's courageous for them to put their vulnerability out and to say, look, this is my beautiful son, my beautiful brother, who gave their life for democracy. And I really think that it's so special that the president and Pete Hegseth, that they went and they really gave their time and they showed respect. I think we have to show respect to the military. We have to show respect for those who are helping us every day live our lives here like this.
Yeah, and Dan, like you pointed out, many presidents have said this is the most difficult thing, as you said, the letters they have to write, all of those things. But President Trump also, we know today, just before the ceremony, he met face to face with the families. So it's not just through a letter or a phone call. You're looking them in the eyes and you're feeling and seeing their grief.
Look, not every president can be at every one of these, unfortunately. But it's a testament to Donald Trump in the middle of his day that he is taking the time to go up and do this. Just like when Barack Obama did it, I would say the same thing. So I think it sends that message that I care. It sends that I want to take some time, get to know the family, send them, my condolences. And look, this is a person who does talk a lot about peace, right? And I think he means it. Everyone around him says he does. And I think, good for Donald Trump to do this.
I think it's also very genuine, too. Yep. I sometimes maybe that you do it for a PR stunt or, you go because you have to. President Trump is notoriously known for always meeting with the fallen soldiers' families, with law enforcement, with everyone, after an event like this.
Comes from his heart. He's very true to himself. I mean, we all know President Trump doesn't do anything he doesn't want to do.
That's a good point.
So, if he's doing something, it really is from his heart, and it just shows, how serious he takes this as well.
Yeah, I think even watching him, we're seeing him now. I mean, he has not changed his facial expression. He has been utterly silent, as everyone has, still just holding that posture, showing the utmost respect for, again, to your point, Alexander, these young kids truly who gave the ultimate sacrifice. And again, something that is so important to see, and we can see they're making a move at this point away from the plane towards the vehicle.
Information. Truth is freedom. Is Newsmax. It's real news for real people.